Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. The Lakers' 9-game win streak is finally snapped. They lost 113 to 110 to the Cade Cunningham-less Detroit Pistons tonight. First loss for the Lakers since March 5th in Denver. That was 18 days ago. LA drops to 46 and 26. They are now up 1 in the loss column over Houston and 2 over Denver and Minnesota, though technically when you factor in how many games back each of those teams is, the Lakers still have a 3-game lead over each of them for the number 3 seed. But a tough loss for the Lakers. They had been playing with fire a little bit lately, particularly in the first Houston game and then the most recent Orlando game. But tonight it was really more so that second quarter where they just ran off the floor, outscored 42 to 25. You look at the rest of the game, they held Detroit to 23 in the first, 24 in the third, and 24 in the fourth. This was a game that the Lakers could have stolen despite trailing for most of it. They regained the lead with about 39 seconds remaining, and then ultimately Dennis Jenkins hit a big shot. Pistons got a big stop, made their free throws again, and then got a stop on the final play. So also a rare clutch loss for the Lakers. They enter tonight with the best clutch record in the NBA at 22-6. They are now 22-7, 4-1 on the road trip with one more game left before they head home at Indiana on Wednesday. Then that is against a team that is, I believe, lost 16 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Could be 17. They actually won tonight, so excuse me. Let me correct myself. Indiana has won, but they were on a 16-game losing streak, and they're having an ultimate tank off right now with Washington for who can have the worst record in the NBA. But after that, Lakers get a crack at Brooklyn and Washington when they get back to Los Angeles, and then the schedule tightens up a bit down the stretch. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang, shout out to the real ones. Appreciate you guys still tuning in after a difficult loss. And I want to look back on this stretch, and to me, like this is the big picture takeaway of this. I don't want to focus on the negative. Like there will be things to touch on during the notable performers section, during the stat of the night, during some of the takeaways from the game. But I want to keep this positive because I think sometimes we tend to dwell in the moment on a loss and forget the big picture. And for me, Buha's big picture is the stretch that changed the Lakers season. So I want to look back on this 12-1 stretch, technically 12-2 if we count tonight. I'm not going to count tonight in most of this analysis, just because at some point this stretch was going to end, and who knows? I think the Lakers are going to win the next 3 games at least. So this will end up being more of an extended like 15-2 stretch. But up until this point, with the streak ending tonight, I think looking back at this 12-1 stretch they just had, which included the 9-game win streak, LA had the second best record in the NBA behind only OKC, who went 10-0 over the same span from February 28th through March 22nd. But a slew of statement wins, beating Denver, Minnesota, New York, and Houston twice. Then we could even throw in Orlando and Miami, who project more as lower tier Eastern Conference playoff teams, but were 2 teams that were rolling going into those matchups to the hottest teams in the NBA. Looking at some of LA's success over this stretch from a statistical perspective, number 3 in offense, number 7 in defense, number 5 in net rating, number 6 in turnover percentage, number 3 in true shooting, number 1 in effective field goal percentage, number 6 in steals per 100 possessions, number 11 in blocks per 100 possessions, and number 6 in three-point percentage. So taking a step back and just processing what we witnessed, like the Lakers had not had a stretch like this at any other point of the season. We could look at the 15-4 start they had, but that was primarily without LeBron, who missed the first 14 games. They also had several other injuries and guys in and out of the lineup. They weren't playing their ultimate starting group, which has been great since they made the shift to Marcus Smart. They have a plus 11.3 net rating with those 5 starters together. That was the OG starting group, which really struggled. I mean, the first iteration without LeBron did well, but then once they added LeBron in, that group just did not work together. And it felt like this was an incomplete team. Then you had all the injuries that they had of, Luka missed his time, Austin missed his time, LeBron missed his time, DA, Marcus, Rui, basically everybody outside of Jake LaRavia has missed some stretch of at least a few games throughout the season. And it led to a bunch of inconsistency. They had several notable no-shows against elite competition beginning in December. And when you looked at the starting group's lineup data, when you looked at the Lakers net rating, remember for deep into the season, they had a negative point differential and negative net rating despite being a top 6 team in the West record wise. It felt like some of this was fool's gold at times. And it was like the Lakers were overachieving and continuing to win in spite of their statistical profile. And they had a bunch of close wins, some of them against lesser competition. And we just weren't quite sure what to make of this team. And we would see these little kernels, these flashes of what they could be, but they had not yet put it together. The closest was that 7-game win streak that they had earlier in the season from mid-November into late November. But again, as I've talked about multiple times over the last few shows, they beat New Orleans twice, they beat Utah twice, they beat the Clippers, the Bucks, and the Mavericks. It was not an impressive crop of teams that they beat over that stretch. And they're above 500 record was decent, but when you started looking at the above 600 record, and to me, the reason that's important, because over the last few weeks, I've seen some people push back of, why did the Lakers get targeted with their above 600 record? Well, the reason is those are the top 10 teams in the NBA. And if you are getting clobbered by all of the top 10 teams in the NBA, the Lakers beat the Raptors, they beat the Sixers, they beat the Suns, they beat some of these lesser teams that were above 500, but they hadn't beaten the really great teams yet. They hadn't beaten the really good teams yet. And when they matched up with them, they get embarrassed on Christmas against Houston, or they get embarrassed against Detroit. They get embarrassed by OKC, they get embarrassed by San Antonio. And it was just every time they had a marquee matchup, they were getting ran off the floor in embarrassing fashion. So we flash forward now to around the trade deadline. They had started to play a little bit better, and they come out. So they close the final game before the All-Star break. They blow out Dallas in LA, come out of the All-Star break, beat the Clippers. Things are trending up a little bit for the Lakers. Then they hit the low point of the season. It's Pat Riley Statue Day. They get blown out by Boston in the most watched regular season game of the past 25 years. So that adds a certain element of Luka does not have a good game. The Lakers get blown out. And that's when the fans really get flamed with all the anti-Lakers, anti-Luka narrative and discourse that has been going on up until, quite frankly, the last week. It was finally the last week. Some of that narrative and discourse started to change. Luka started to get his flowers in the MVP race. The Lakers started to get their flowers in terms of the contender race. And it took a 9-game win streak for people to start to view this team in a certain light. When I think they had already shown that much earlier in the win streak. But they come out of that 3-game losing streak, Boston, Orlando, Phoenix, and it feels like the season is teetering at that point. And then they have this little easy stretch of Golden State without Steph, Sacramento, and New Orleans. They have a couple blowouts, take care of the Pelicans. And it's okay, they've won 3 in a row, but they haven't really shown. It's they beat 3 bad teams. They lose a close one in Denver. Denver's depleted. They don't have most of their front court. That's a tough loss. But from that point on, the Lakers win their next 9 games. And again, talking through their numbers here, they've been, if you go by record, if you go by net rating, if you go by several statistics, like they've clearly been a top 5, if not top 3 team over this stretch. And this was the stretch to me that changed their season. This was the stretch that I think got Luka in the MVP conversation in a real way, when I think he should have been in it earlier, but this got him actually where people are now talking about Luka versus Shea, Luka versus Jokic, Luka versus Wemby. It got the Lakers in a mix of, a lot of people consider them the 3rd or 4th best team in the West right now. And it also showed that they could beat some of these teams, because they had a bunch of statement games during the stretch. They beat New York wire to wire. They blew Minnesota out in the second half. They went toe-to-toe with Denver and out-executed one of the best crunch time teams of the last few years. They go into Houston, the team that embarrassed them on Christmas, and they beat them in a couple of manners. They beat them in the rock fight, which should have favored Houston, and then they also beat them in a more up-tempo, higher-scoring game. Then they go to Miami, dead legs, having just played 2 wars against Houston and a really tough overtime game against Denver. And Luka drops 60, the crowning moment for him during this stretch. Then they're running on fumes against Orlando. Luke Kennard hits the game winner. They somehow find a way to pull off the comeback there. And then they nearly do it again tonight. They nearly pull off the comeback again. They were up by 1 with 39 seconds left after DeAndre Ayton hit a couple of free throws. But the magical run finally concludes. And again, I think the Lakers are going to win their next 3, and then they have a tough couple games there with Cleveland and OKC. So we'll see, a couple more statement opportunities for them down the stretch here. But I just want, this stretch to me really proved that the Lakers are capable of defending at a certain level. They are capable of, from a mental fortitude perspective, we knew about the clutch success throughout the season, and that takes a certain level of mental fortitude. But they won a lot of these games in varying manners. It wasn't the same, one thing if the Lakers had a bunch of shootouts and they were just out offensing opponents, and it was just, okay, we're going through a nice shooting stretch here. We have Luka, we have Austin, we have LeBron, we have Luke Kennard and Rui spacing the floor. We have DA and Jackson rolling. Good luck defending us. It was not that. There were stretches of that, but there were also stretches of hard-nosed physical defense, out muscling, out physicaling, out just hustling their opponents. And so they won in a variety of styles that, to me, really spoke to the way this team has come together, the versatility this team has shown. They can go big, they can go small, they've had success with different defensive styles, with more aggressive styles, more passive styles, the zone. There's just been a lot to really like over this stretch. Now, it's not been perfect. Again, if not for a miraculous play from Austin Reeves and a game-winning shot from Luka Doncic, they lose that Denver game. If not for 60 points from Luka on the road on the second out of a back-to-back, they lose that Miami game. If not for Luke Kennard, several things going in their favor down the stretch there, and Luke Kennard hitting the game-winning 3, they don't win that Orlando game. So they've danced with their fatality at times during this stretch, but they always found a way to pull it out. Again, nearly did so tonight, but this was a transformative stretch for me. I don't know if I've ever changed my opinion about a team this drastically, because if you asked me after that Denver loss, going back 3 weeks ago, what was the most likely outcome for LA, where I had them in the West, I had them 6th in the West, and I had them as a likely first round exit. Now this is completely swapped, where I think now that Denver's healthy, it's going to be a real battle, and we'll see how both teams close the season in terms of who's actually the 3rd best team in the West. But right now, I would have them 3rd in the West, and I would have them as a likely second round team, and with a decent chance against San Antonio. So the season has completely flipped here over these last 3 weeks in a real way. And for me, again, I've made this point before, but coming out of the All-Star break, I did my episode where I said I want to see LA get healthy, which they've largely been healthy. I want to see them figure out the big 3 minutes, The big three have been crushing it together. I want to see them with several statement wins down the stretch. They've delivered on that front. So they've gone 3 for 3 for me in terms of checking all the boxes I wanted to see coming out of the All-Star break. It has not been the prettiest basketball at times, and there certainly have been some lowlights, including the Boston, Orlando, and Phoenix losses. But the Lakers have put together a stretch here where just post All-Star break, they are now 13-5. Like that's pretty good coming out of the break. They also beat the Clippers, who, despite making their trades at the deadline, have still been a good team when healthy, which they were for that first post All-Star break game. So I know we will get into this game more and what went wrong and what could have been better. But I just wanted to take a step back, look at this stretch, look at the post All-Star break stretch. And again, top 3 offense, top 7 defense, top 5 net rating, second best record, several statement wins over really good teams, including 3 teams that, they're playing one of those 3 teams in round 1. So they sent a message to each of those opponents. It's been a great 3-week stretch for the Lakers. I think it's going to continue. I think they're going to beat Indiana and Brooklyn and Washington, keep the good vibes going. Then some tests against 4-game stretch there. Cleveland, OKC, Dallas, OKC. Put Dallas to the side, but Cleveland, OKC, and then OKC again. Those are 3 really big games down the stretch of the season. Then let's get more into the game, though. So notable performers, we have to start with Luka Doncic, and I will be sharing my screen for this one. Give me a second. All right. I know some people had said they could not see, so I want to make sure you guys can see the full box score here. All right, so we'll start with Luka. An off night for Luka from a shooting perspective. This is now back-to-back games for him where he went 12 for 30 against Orlando, 11 for 29. And one thing that I felt with Luka that, to me, this is kind of the case with the team right now. The team looked tired tonight. Like, I think Luka looked tired, but the team at large looked tired. They were fighting through it. They were pushing through it, but they had started to look tired, in my opinion, in the Denver game. They gutted it out against Houston twice. They pushed through it second night of a back-to-back, largely off of Luka's brilliance with the 60 points. And then Orlando, similar thing, just a rock fight. They had to get it out the mud. They pulled that off. But tonight, it felt like it caught up to them, where I think from a process perspective, the Lakers did a lot of what they've been doing lately. They just did not have the results. And 2 things that really stood out to me were the 3-point shooting, just 8 for 29. They weren't even really generating good looks from deep because they were not getting downhill. They were not creating separation against Detroit's defense. And then 12 turnovers is a good number, but 8 of those turnovers came in the fourth quarter. And that, to me, was why you see that final mark of 24 to 23. So to bring it back to Luka, 32 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals. I thought held up well defensively. Like the Lakers in general, their help rotations tonight, I thought were, another sign of some level of fatigue here, where there was a lot of miscommunications, late rotations, and guys sometimes over rotating or over helping, where 2 or 3 guys would shift toward one guy, then someone's backside cutting them, or then getting an offensive rebound or something. So the overall defense tonight, there were some really good stretches, including in that third quarter and parts of the first quarter. But I also thought second quarter, and especially down the stretch in the fourth, they just made too many mistakes. But Luka, he's been playing at such a high level that I don't want to dwell on his off shooting nights. But yeah, 32 points on 29 shots is just not efficient. 3 for 13 on threes, 7 for 8 at the free throw line. I thought this was the second straight game too, where the Lakers, I feel like, didn't get the best whistle. And my default stance is like, I don't like to blame the refs. And Lakers still shot 31 free throws, so it's like hard to criticize that number. But it felt like with Luka, Austin, and LeBron in particular, they each could have gone to the foul line a few more times based on the shots that they missed and the physicality on that. But hey, like some crews are just not going to call as many fouls, or they're going to let certain parts of the game just kind of play out on the court. And it felt like there was a lot of contact on jumpers, a lot of contact on drives that just were not called. So Lakers have to find a way to play through that. That's actually going to be one of my takeaways. But I mean, Luka's defense with the 3 steals, I thought he did his job playing the passing lanes and closing out, keeping guys in front of him. 3 turnovers with how much he has the ball. I don't think that was that's a fine number. But misses the last couple of shots late, got 2 good looks. I mean, one of those looks is against Kevin Huerter. The last shot was a botched play overall on multiple people, where LeBron throws it gets tipped, and he's had several inbounds plays that have been tipped or stolen in the last few years. Maxey sets a good screen, but then Maxey's kind of in the way, and it gets deflected. Then Maxey kind of taps it, and then Luka just is draped by Jalen Duren and throws up a shot that was not the best look, but I liked the concept of the play. I think JJ has been in his bag with some of these late game actions that he's drawn up. But the Kevin Huerter one was like that to me was one where I mean Luka makes that shot in his sleep, and the fact, especially against a mismatch like that, the fact that he didn't, I think, was just another sign that tonight he didn't quite have his legs. Another guy who didn't really have his legs until the second half was Austin Reeves. He had 24 points overall, 7 for 15 shooting, 2 for 6 on threes, 8 for 9 at the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 turnovers, and a block. Austin only had 6 points in the first half on 2 for 8 shooting, but ends up exploding in the second half with 18 points. I believe had 12 in the third quarter. And second straight game where in the third quarter he carried the offense, and after a subpar first half by his standards, got into a groove immediately coming out of halftime. And I think he and Luka combined for like the first 15, 16 points coming out of the half for LA. Also had that big bucket coming out of the Pistons, Ayton makes the free throws, and then the Pistons score, and then Austin scores, and then the Pistons score again, if I'm not mistaken, on the timeline of events. But he got that quick bucket against where the Pistons scored within a few seconds, and then the Lakers come back and are like, no, we're actually going to score. Austin scores within 5 seconds against Dennis Jenkins, but then Dennis Jenkins gets him back on the next play. So this was a game with Austin where I thought he struggled at times with their physicality, and this continues that narrative that Austin cannot handle certain teams with certain physical profiles. I will note Asar Thompson did one of the, in terms of a Lakers opponent, that was one of the best individual perimeter defensive performances I've seen from a Lakers opponent this season against both Luka and Austin. I thought Asar Thompson, his ball pressure and his ability to navigate screens. I drew a couple offensive fouls on Lakers screeners, but recovering around screens, slithering past screens, being physical, being disruptive, he just did a great job tonight. So Austin, a couple of his turnovers I think 2 of them were fouls that just weren't called, and he's got to be able to play through that. And there was the one where he gets bumped around the half court line. I think there was another one where he gets bumped out of bounds, and there's just ultimately comes down to physicality and playing through that. But I also think they were clearly fouls; they just were not called. But he got into his groove in the second half, and I think stabilized in an impressive way that would have liked more from him in the first half, but he did his fair share. And then defensively, they picked on him a little bit. Jenkins, he was the primary Jenkins guy, though they switched Laravion to him. There's also a bunch of switching just with the Lakers scheme. As you see, Dennis Jenkins dropped 30 points and 8 assists, only 2 turnovers, 11 of 18 shooting. Just did a great Cade Cunningham impression tonight. Then LeBron had a rough first half, went 0 for 5, but got into a nice groove also in the third quarter and parts of the fourth quarter. Finished with 4 for 10 shooting, or finished 12 points on 4 for 10 shooting, 1 for 2 on threes, 3 for 3 at the free throw line, 9 points, 10 assists, nearly had a triple-double, 4 turnovers, 1 block. So with LeBron, he jammed his hand in the first quarter, like midway through. There was an entry pass where Tobias Harris ends up stealing it, and they both collide with the ball. And LeBron had to, exited shortly thereafter, was having his hand looked at. And I felt like from that point on, he was far less aggressive than he was initially in the first quarter, but did find a groove, did hit a 3. JJ said after the game that the Lakers could have done a better job with some of the deep seals and positioning he had inside of finding him. But 0 for 5 in the first half, 4 for 5 in the second half. Like the Lakers in general, like Luka had a great, I think Luka was 5 for 10 5 for 9, 5 for 10 in the first quarter. Well, he was 5 for 11. Then he misses 4 shots, doesn't score in the second quarter. And so he's 5 for 15, but then Austin's 2 for 8. LeBron's 0 for 5. So you look at the big 3 in the first half, and it makes sense why the Lakers are down 13 when you combine Luka and Austin and LeBron making 7 shots and missing 27, 28. So yeah, going like 7 for 28, I think off the top of my head. That's not going to cut it. And the Lakers were actually fortunate to only be down 13 based on their collective offensive performances. But with LeBron, the rebounding was awesome tonight. I think he stepped up in a big way on the glass. The 9 rebounds. He just had the 15 in Miami, but the 9 rebounds were actually his most since the final game before the All-Star break against Dallas. He had 10. So you got to go back over a month, almost like 5 weeks outside of the Miami game for the last time LeBron had this many rebounds. So now 2 of his past 3 games, he's had 9 or more rebounds. So that's encouraging to see because that had been an area he hadn't been as sharp in this season. And the passing tonight was brilliant. Second time in 3 games that LeBron has 10 or more assists. And then again, to go back to the last time he had double-digit assists before these last couple games, you have to go back to the 20th, February 20th against the Clippers. So now you're going back a month. So there's been some signs with LeBron where despite back-to-back rough shooting performances, 38.5% against Orlando, 40% against Detroit, other parts of his game with the rebounding and the passing are rebounding to previous levels that he showed earlier in the season. And he's another guy that has looked tired. Like I just think the team collectively is ready to be done with this road trip, ready for a little bit of a break here with the Indiana, Brooklyn, and Washington matchups. Then shifting our attention to the big men, DeAndre Ayton, 13 points, 10 rebounds, 1 turnover, 1 steal, 5 for 6 shooting, 3 for 4 free throws, went 3 for 4 down the stretch of the game, hit some big free throws. 4 offensive rebounds, and that was a big factor for the Lakers early. First play of the game is I think Luka misses a shot. Ayton gets the offensive rebound, then hits him on the move and or kicks it out. Then Luka attacks and gets that little running banker that he made. And Ayton, I thought was awesome tonight. Like I still think defensively he's not been quite up to like the last few games, but part of that's probably fatigue too. I think this is a team-wide issue right now where everyone is not as sharp and as energetic as they were as recently as a few games ago. But on the offensive end, I think he's been with the finishing and he was battling Jalen Duren in there, getting several big offensive rebounds. I think he did have a couple of nice defense possessions down the stretch of the game and stops down the stretch of the game. DeAndre Ayton, like Lakers shifted to switching 1 through 5 in the second half. He was contributed to that. So I think DeAndre Ayton has just been solid these last couple weeks, and really since that Denver loss, starting with the win streak, like it is correlated with DeAndre Ayton being, he missed that Indiana game, but he's been much more engaged, looked much better. Jake Laravia got the start with no Marcus Smart and no Rui Hachimura. He ends up scoring 7 points, 3 for 4 shooting, 1 for 2 on threes, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 4 fouls. It was a mixed bag for Jake tonight. I liked a couple of his buckets were bully ball possessions. He had the one possession where he used the armbar against Duran, but he didn't like really push it too much and didn't have it too high where it wasn't called an offensive foul. Had another play where, one of his driving, spinning, post up moves where he scored inside, also hit a 3. But you see the 0 stocks, 1 rebound, 29 minutes as a starter. You want more from Jake. You'd like to see 5-6 rebounds and at least 3 stocks from him. So I think he played physically, defensively, and tried his best, but he's been up and down lately, and I thought we saw parts of that tonight. Like, I actually think he was better offensively than he was defensively, where for the most part he's been better defensively than offensively recently. Then turning our attention to the bench, Jackson Hayes Jackson's back. Like, I think the Lakers are in a little bit of a tough spot here in terms of sometimes Jackson versus DA, where Jackson and Luka's chemistry, and even Austin and Jackson's chemistry, is just A1. And I mean, now that he's looked more like himself these last few games, like just the lobs, the dump offs, he catches everything, he finishes or draws fouls. And I think that's been at a high level. And then the defense tonight, 11 points, 3 rebounds, but 2 steals and 4 blocks. Jackson was blocking and altering everything tonight. I actually was wondering if JJ was going to close with him. He kept him in pretty late, but then like 4.5 minute mark or so goes back to DA to close it out. But the reason I mentioned like the tough decision there is because Jackson, I think, is still more of a natural offensive pairing with Luka in particular, but to a lesser degree, Austin, although Austin and DA also have pretty good chemistry. And then I think the defense has been great from Jackson. Like, I think he's clearly been at a higher level than DA on the defensive side these last few games. However, the gap between them as rebounders is enormous. And that's where I think JJ has trusted Ayton more to close some of these games, because there's just like a baseline level of they need his size, his physicality, and the rebounding, where he might not be the same lob threat or finishing threat necessarily as Jackson, or not consistently like Jackson. And I don't even think he's as good of a short roll playmaker as Jackson, but the rebounding is like the Lakers need the rebounding. That's been an area they've really struggled during the stretch. Like that's one of the few blemishes during this 12-1 stretch has been they've been a bad defensive rebounding team. Then Luke Kennard kind of went back to some of his prior struggles in terms of these last few games where he broke out and looked like himself against Orlando. But tonight, 6 points, 1 for 5 shooting, 1 for 5 on threes. Got fouled on a 3, which that was half his points. Were 3 free throws on that. The Pistons could not stop fouling the Lakers on 3-point attempts. I think they had 4 of them tonight, if I'm not mistaken. But Luke, I will note, I thought he got the blender going, and he does more than just the shooting, just the gravity. I thought tonight with a couple of assists, he did some good things, but with no Marcus and with Jake not necessarily playing the best basketball, no Rui, they closed with Luke, but I thought it compromised the defense a bit. It compromised the rebounding a bit. And with him not shooting and scoring at a certain level offensively, it just was like, the Lakers were kind of shorthanded on both sides of the ball to some degree. And then Maxi Kleba came in for that final possession. JJ loves dusting off Maxi for big moments. Vando, I thought Vando, doesn't play the last few games, plays 15 minutes tonight, has a couple nice cuts for dunks, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He was everywhere defensively. He just looked like Vando. So I thought that was promising. And I don't know what that's going to mean for the future rotation. Like JJ, once again, post game noted that the Lakers have 9 guys in their rotation, which to me, Vando's not part of the 9-man rotation. And so, it feels like he's just out of the rotation when they're healthy. But being shorthanded tonight, they went back to Vando, and I thought he played pretty well. It was not out there at the end, and I know people noted that he probably should have been out there, and I think that's fair. Then Adu Thero got dusted off at first play that he's out there. They're running a baseline out of bounds action. He gets a back cut, gets fouled, makes 1 or 2 free throws, had a kind of wild attempt in transition. And I think you see the physical tools with Adu, and I'm glad that he was dusted off. He didn't really get much of an actual shift, only played 2 minutes. The game moves fast for him, and he's just very raw. And even looking at some of his G League film compared to this, like, it's 2 totally different players, which is understandable to a degree, especially for a rookie who's missed as much time as he has. But I think like the confidence, the poise, the skill, it has not quite translated yet in his NBA opportunities. Granted, they've been very minor opportunities, so he remains a work in progress, but I was at least happy to see he got dusted off. Then stat of the night is going to be 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter. I thought that was the story of the game on a night where the Lakers were not shooting the ball well. To shoot 28% on threes, you cannot turn the ball over as much as they did in the fourth quarter. And Jackson had one. Jackson contributed to a couple of them. I think technically it went to someone else. One of the ones that, he threw the ball out of bounds. Then he didn't catch a pass. There was like a kind of a jumbled pass in traffic that whizzed by him that he could have caught. So yeah, I mean, it was just like, I think they had 5 turnovers in the first 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. Took care of the ball better down the stretch, but that was a stretch of the game where the game was hanging in the balance. Lakers could have taken more control of the game. Then they had the big run to close the third quarter, but felt like they had a missed opportunity there. And then once it got into crunch time, Detroit out executed them. Then in terms of 3 takeaways before we get into the Q&A here. First one is playing through physicality. So what I mean by this is I think one of the big stories from this game for me was Detroit just beat up the Lakers, and this is coming off the heels of Orlando beating up the Lakers and Houston kind of beating up the Lakers. And to be clear, like, the Lakers have held their own from a physicality perspective to a degree. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the Orlando and Detroit games, both those teams got away with a lot of contact, and contact that, depending on the night, depending on the referee crew, that could have easily resulted in like 6 to 10 more free throws for the Lakers than they shot in each of those games, and some more foul trouble for prominent defenders prominent players in those games. But I think one of and so it's tough to separate the fatigue from some of the process and results here. But I think one of the things we have seen is the Lakers have struggled offensively against some of these bigger, tougher, more physical defenses. I think about the first Houston game. I think about the Orlando game. I think about tonight. And again, there's an element of fatigue here. The Lakers have been playing every other day. They've had no breaks. Multiple guys are banged up. So I want to at least acknowledge that it's not like they're the freshest, healthiest team necessarily going into all these matchups. But the season is a war of attrition, and the Lakers have a sprint toward the end of the regular season. They got 10 more games. They're not really getting a break anytime soon until that week or so going into game 1 of the playoffs. So down the stretch here, I want to see, and like, to be clear, like, they beat Orlando, they beat Houston, they almost beat Detroit. So they've like withstood this, and they found ways to offset it. But when I project into a playoff series, I think there is an element of, with Luka, you need to play Luka with a certain physicality, otherwise he'll just dominate you. And even if you play him with physicality, he's still going to dominate you. But like, at a bare minimum, you need to play Luka with a certain amount of physicality. You need a certain tenacity and physicality at that point of attack spot. But then thinking about Austin, thinking about LeBron, thinking about DA, like teams with a certain amount of physicality and force with their defense, I think at times have been able to disrupt the Lakers offensively. And the Lakers have the talent and the skill and the execution offensively to overcome that. And if it is a Houston or Minnesota in round one, I still would pick the Lakers over either one of those teams. But I think this has been an area where they have struggled a little bit looking at these last few games. And like it's just something for me to monitor moving forward, because tonight I thought Detroit just manhandled them at times. And with the pressure, the deflections, the fouls, LA handled it like reasonably well. Only 12 turnovers, but several of those were, again, like offensive fouls, trying to break guys open, not catching passes, struggling to attack against pressure, getting trapped and turning the ball over. So the defense did disrupt them to some degree here. And if we actually look at what's funny is the offensive ratings were actually high tonight. Detroit had a 120 offensive rating, 117 defensive rating, which means conversely, LA had a 117 offensive rating, 120 defensive rating. So from a possession, there's only 94 possessions in this game. So the game did slow down a bit. This was a slower paced game, which like a slow paced rock fight is going to favor Detroit, especially without Cade. And that's something I haven't really even touched on within all this. Like they're now 4-0 since Cade went out. But he was a guy who was a back end MVP candidate. Like a lot of people had him 4th or 5th recently, first team All-NBA guy. And for them to be without him, this is a disappointing loss from that perspective. Like they have been playing well and they're first in the East. And so like from that perspective, it's, you see the bones of this team and number 2 defense in the league. They're tough, they're physical, they're nasty, but they were without their best player, and even despite, or regardless of that, they were still able to score pretty effectively against the Lakers. So I think this is just something to monitor for LA. And this is, for me, when I look at the OKC and San Antonio matchups, it's like, okay, well, up to this point in the season, both of those teams have been better offensively than the Lakers. More recently, the Lakers have been on par with them, but over the course of the season, those two teams have both been better than LA offensively, and they're better defensively and can provide some of this physicality, toughness. I mean, we know about OKC. They're fouling you on every possession. They're trying to injure you on some possessions, and like they're getting away with it. So you look at that, and then you look at San Antonio, and the combination of just Wemby and Castle alone is like the defensive player of the year and an all defense level guy. That's a pretty strong defensive foundation. So I just think this is something for the Lakers to tuck away and try to improve on over the final 10 games or so. Is like, there's going to be nights where they just don't get a great whistle or a good whistle. They have to learn to play through that. They have to play through contact and physicality. I think they've been much better with that progressively throughout the season. And again, even in a couple of these games, they won them, and they won in close fashion. But I think the two biggest tests for them will ultimately be OKC and San Antonio. And those teams thrive with this type of style, plus better offenses than Orlando, Houston, and Detroit. And like, that's what makes those teams two big forces. So I think it's something for LA to really try to hone in on down the stretch here. And then a couple quick takeaways before we get into the Q&A. Takeaway number 2, injury updates on Marcus Smart and Rui Hachimura. So Rui hurt his calf in the Miami game, played through it, then it reared up again in the Orlando game. That's why he only played 15 minutes, as some of you noted. In the second half, he was not out there the entire time, but was not out there celebrating with the group because he was dealing with this calf injury. So he's day-to-day moving forward. And then Marcus Smart, who JJ pointed out, not having Marcus tonight just absolutely killed them, and they really missed him, which I agree with. I think if Marcus plays, they win this game. But Marcus hurt both his ankle and his hip in the Orlando game. The ankle was from the Goga Batadze play, which we hadn't even touched on it yet, but Luka and Goga both had their double technicals rescinded. Goga went from a Laker, Twitter, Laker Reddit favorite for the backup center spot over these last couple of years to Now, public enemy number one, he's officially become a Lakers villain for the Luka situation, nearly getting him suspended, but then also nearly injuring Marcus and a couple other physical plays. But Marcus is now day to day with primarily the ankle injury, but also some hip soreness. And then wanted to just look at the final 10 games because we're at the stretch run here. Lakers have played 72 games, and I wanted to highlight the final 10 games of the season. So I'm going to pull this up here. So final 10 games: at Indiana, versus Brooklyn, versus Washington, versus Cleveland, at OKC, at Dallas, versus OKC, at Golden State, versus Phoenix, versus Utah. So some quick math here. That is 6 home games and 4 road games. And I would say at a minimum, there's like 4 locked in wins, in my opinion: Indiana, Brooklyn, Washington, Utah. Those are 4 tanking teams that if the Lakers show up with the baseline level of competence, competitiveness, tenacity, seriousness, they should go 4-0. Then, I'll throw Dallas in there too. Dallas is another tanking team. So 5-0. So I think half of these games are against tanking teams. Lakers should go 5-0 in those 5 matchups. Then you have Cleveland, OKC, Golden State, and Phoenix. OKC, self-explanatory, best team in the league, defending champs. I think huge matchups for Luka specifically, with Shea being the MVP frontrunner. If the Lakers, particularly in that first matchup, can go into OKC, beat OKC, Luka outplay Shea head-to-head, I think that could be enough to start to tilt the MVP race in Luka's favor more. But so you got those two, and really looking at it, like San Antonio is on OKC's heels. So I think OKC is going to be playing for something in that first game, but they're probably going to be playing for something in that second game. Like that might be the game where if they win, they clinch the 1 seed. Maybe they have the 1 seed clinched at that point. But also if I'm OKC, I'm not running from the smoke. I'm playing the Lakers full strength. Like unless someone's dealing with an injury or something, they got to be held out. I want the smoke with the Lakers. I want the smoke Luka versus Shea, and like let's see who's the better team, who's the better player, etc. Like I think for both sides, that's going to be a couple of big matchups that both sides are really going to want. The Cleveland game is going to be a big one. Cleveland, remember, blew out the Lakers in Cleveland on the Grammy road trip. And then Golden State and Phoenix are going to be interesting because both teams are locked into the play-in. Like Phoenix is 3.5 games back of Houston. Houston actually just lost to Chicago. So Houston now drops, they're 2 games back of LA in the loss column, 3.5 games back of the Lakers. So update there on Houston. But Golden State is jockeying with Portland for the 9-10. They're a 1.5 back of Portland. So that game against the Lakers probably will matter. Steph should be back and have been back for a few games by then. And then Phoenix, they're sort of in no man's land where they're too far behind Houston to get the 6, but they're also 4.5 games above the Clippers for number 7. So maybe Phoenix is resting guys and preparing for the play-in, but I'm sure the Suns would love another opportunity to play the Lakers and try to beat the Lakers. So point being, like, none of those games I think are going to be easy. I think those are all going to be games the Lakers are going to have to go out and really try to win. Again, OKC and Cleveland, those are statement games, big matchups. But Golden State and Phoenix, I think, will both be playing for something down the stretch of the season. So LA should beat Golden State and Phoenix, and then we'll see if they could go at least 1-2 versus Cleveland and OKC, if not 2-1. But I mean, looking at these final 10 games, I think 7-3 is realistic, but you could also talk me into 8-2 or 9-1. Like I think I would say 8-2 is more likely than 6-4. So I think 7-3 is like a conservative projection for LA down the stretch here, but they could easily go 8-2 or 9-1. And at 46-26, I mean, we're talking about potentially 54 or 55 win season, which I think would be great for LA based on the first half, first like 60% of the season, plus all the injuries they've had. for them to win 54, 55 games, I think that would be amazing. But with all that said, we are about to get into the Q&A. First, a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's show, Klover. Shout out to Klover. After this quick 1-minute ad, I will be right back. Thank you to Klover for sponsoring this video. Klover is a financial app designed to give people faster, smarter access to their money without the hidden fees or predatory practices that often come with payday loans. With Klover, users can advance up to $400 before payday with no interest, no credit checks, and no late fees. Whether it's for unexpected car repairs, groceries, rent, gas, or a wild night out on the town, Klover helps people bridge the gap until payday and avoid financial stress. You could either wait a few days to receive your cash advance or pay a small fee to get it deposited instantly. Unlike other apps, there is no monthly membership fee to get an advance. Klover is on a mission to end predatory lending by offering a safe, transparent, and fair alternative. Not all users will qualify. Advances range from $25 to $400, with the average advance being $160. Express transfer fees may apply. Short on cash? Access up to $400 with no credit check or late fees. Click the link in the description so they know I sent you. Shout out to Klover, and thank you for sponsoring this video. All right. Thank you to Klover. Let's get into the Q&A. First one from Ricky Burt 7417. Thank you for the super chat. LeBron has always been an efficiency guy, and I think that as something that bothers him about Luka, or I think that is something that bothers him about Luka. He doesn't always let the play develop. I mean, I think that's the difference in their game. I don't know if that bothers LeBron or not. I think that would be speculation on my part. I have not heard that behind the scenes. But yeah, I mean, they just go about it in different ways, right? Like I think Luka, talked about it on here before, but the Luka prefers to strike early, and then based on you playing on your heels against him, you see teams start to sell out in different ways where they will start to change their coverages and have to adapt against him. Otherwise, he can easily go for 45, 50, 60 points if you're defending him a certain way. And even if you aren't defending him a certain way, he could still do that on any given night. Whereas LeBron, I think, has always been more of a guy who is trying to figure out what's the best read or play on a given possession. And it doesn't have to be him shooting necessarily. It's more so taking what the defense is giving him. And if it's inviting him to score or to shoot, he will attack that way. If it's more so shifting toward him and away from his teammates, then it's finding cutters and shooters. So I think from a basketball ethos perspective, that there's certainly similarities there. And LeBron, I mean, just go back to a couple years ago, like LeBron was saying before Luka arrived in LA, that Luka was his favorite player in the league, his favorite player to watch. So I think LeBron sees some of Luka in himself. And then Luka has talked about his admiration for LeBron and how he has patterned parts of his game around LeBron, and like just the apex predator wing who can do it all, is an elite scorer, elite rebounder, elite passer. Like there are not many guys who have been able to check those boxes in that 6'7" to 6'9" range. Luka and LeBron are both on the short list. That's what makes both of them all-time greats. They go about it in different ways. Luka has a little bit more James Harden and Kobe Bryant in his game. LeBron has more Magic Johnson in his game, right? So that there's just some differences in how they conduct their business. And of course, we're talking more like prime LeBron versus Luka now, not really like this version of LeBron where he's obviously past his prime. Still a great player, still playing at a very high level, but not who he was even as recently as a few years ago. I mean, even as recently as last season, right? Like last season, top 6 in MVP, top 6 All NBA. He's not been quite to that level this year, but yeah, I mean, I get like, I think that's the thing that people will knock Luka for is just the efficiency. I think that's the thing that ultimately for a lot of people holds him back in the conversations with Shea and Jokic, is those guys from a true shooting perspective and a lot of the offensive metrics just are at a slightly different level because of their field goal percentage and because of their turnovers. But Luka's way has been proven to work. It's been the primary driving force behind the Lakers' recent turnaround here over the last few weeks. It's led a team to the finals. It's led a team to the conference finals. It's had playoff success. He has the second highest playoff scoring average. Like, Luka's a big game player, and I know we're not like, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit, but I'm sure like LeBron does not play that way. So that, I think there is like a core difference between their approach, but I think they both think the game at a high level, see the game at a high level, and both guys make their teammates better, even if they go about it in different ways. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Why not sub in Vando with LA up 110-109 when Detroit called a timeout for the defensive possession? Why not call a timeout when they go up 111-110 for the last shot? It's a fair question. I know some of you guys have been on JJ for his lack of timeouts, and it's been something that I've been noticing more ever since it's been brought up several times recently. He does, like, I feel like, come from more of the Phil Jackson school of thought of letting, or even like Steve Kerr, like letting the guys kind of play through it and figure it out on the fly. And to his credit, it has worked a lot in crunch time. Like, the Lakers are 22-7 in the clutch, best record in the NBA. So I don't want to act like they have this glaring clutch execution problem. And one quick correction on going back and looking through the play-by-play. Dan Jenkins got fouled. So his DA got fouled, makes both free throws. Then Jenkins goes quickly, gets fouled. He makes both free throws. Then Austin goes quickly, and he scores off of Luka's assist. Then Jenkins scores. Luka misses the pull-up. Pistons get the rebound. Jenkins makes the free throws. And then you get the final possession where Luka is forced into a deep three. But you're talking about after. So this is after the. Is this asking about when the Pistons call timeout and they're on offense? Yeah, I guess Vando. Like, I just think it comes down to JJ doesn't trust Vando, and JJ hasn't. I think one thing JJ can be better with is situational substitutions. And again, I think he's done it more offensively than defensively, where he has put Kennard or Rui in at times if they weren't in, and he'll put Maxey in as the screener. But yeah, I think it did make sense to put Vando in there. But yeah, I don't know. Just, he is not trusted Vando. Jay, again, thank you for the super chat. Of course, I'd prefer a win, but can't be too mad after the stretch we had. We were going to have a game like this at some point. On to the next. Yeah, and look, the Lakers, they had several wins by the skin of their teeth. The Denver game, if Austin shoots that missed free throw the same way DeAndre Ayton did when the other night in Orlando, and it just caroms down, the game's over. Lakers lose that game. Or if Luka doesn't make that game winner, Lakers lose that game. So, those were, two huge plays that the Lakers. To be fair and to be clear, they dictated their own luck and fortune in those scenarios, with Austin executing that at an incredibly high level, Luka executing his game winner on a high level. But then you also have the Luke Kennard situation, and that out of bounds call could have gone either way. It felt like. Then LeBron gets fouled by Paolo, even though the last 2-minute report said that was not a foul. And if they had called that, then maybe LeBron makes both free throws and it goes to overtime and the Lakers lose, or maybe LeBron makes one free throw and the Lakers lose, right? So several plays during several of these games could have gone in either direction. They went in the Lakers' direction, and you give the Lakers credit for that, for executing down the stretch. But yeah, they were due. They were going to lose at some point. No team goes undefeated, for forever. So they were due for a loss at some point coming up here. It's unfortunate that it came in the manner that it did, just because this was a very winnable game for them. But on to the next. And I think overall they've looked pretty good. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Lakers now 1-9 against the top two teams in the East and West. Won't shade the win streak, but there is luck in the Orlando and Denver games. Unless it's Houston, getting out of first round isn't a foregone conclusion. Peter, Peter's been on this, and I give Peter credit. I think he's got a very sober perspective on the Lakers right now, and I think it's been more on the skeptical side, but maybe you could also argue that's more on like the realistic side. I would agree. I think I was talking about this with a couple people yesterday, but I think the only team. So right now, I would favor the Lakers over. I mean, I would decisively favor them over Houston. I would slightly favor them over Minnesota. And I think Denver is really close, and I don't have a great grasp on it. I still think the best version of Denver probably has a higher ceiling than the Lakers because they've been better than them offensively all season, regardless of who's been in and out of the lineup. And like most of their primary lineups, healthy lineups from early in the season have defended at a top 10 level. So I think if they have Gordon, Brown, and Watson, that's a better foundation than the Lakers have defensively. So that one is close for me. And then I would favor San Antonio and OKC over the Lakers. So by no means are the Lakers like giant favorites right now. I think against anyone outside of Houston, I would favor them against Minnesota. But I think for me, it's more of like a 60-40 favoring despite the regular season success. Like I think Minnesota is going to look more like the first round last year than they are the team the Lakers saw in the regular season. Like Minnesota has also been one of these teams that they're up and down throughout the whole regular season, but then come playoff time, there's a seriousness to them that with their athleticism, physical tools, Ant goes to a different level. Like they're not going to be an easy out for the Lakers, but metaphorical gun to my head, I would pick Lakers over Houston in 5. I would pick Lakers over Wolves in 6. And then I think Lakers Nuggets is probably going 7. And that's a really tough one for me to determine because we saw the game in Denver that went down to the wire. Denver out executed them. We saw the one in LA. Lakers out executed them. They're 1-1 in these close games at like relatively full strength. Denver was pretty shorthanded in the first one. That's a toss-up series for me. And then OKC and San Antonio, I would favor both of. I would heavily favor OKC. San Antonio, I think, is a little bit closer, but still, they've been a much better team in the regular season. But yeah, it's still like I think a win against OKC in one of the final 2 matchups would go a long way in this. How LA matches up with I've refrained from calling it like the 700 club or like looking at how they match up with like the very top of the top. But to your point, they are 0-2 against OKC. They are 1-3 against San Antonio. They are 0-2 against Detroit and 0-2 against Boston. So some context within some of this of Detroit first matchup didn't have Austin. Boston first matchup didn't have Luka or LeBron. OKC first matchup didn't have LeBron, though OKC didn't have J-Dub. Second matchup, no Luka, though OKC didn't have Shea or AJ Mitchell. And then they punted like 1.5 of the San Antonio games. So, but then also their one win against San Antonio. San Antonio didn't have Fox or Harper, which are 2 huge pieces for them. So, but then the Lakers didn't have LeBron and Austin. So, just with the nature of the schedule, we haven't really seen them play these teams at full strength. Like they lost tonight with no Cade, so that's not great against Detroit. They did play Boston at full strength, though Boston didn't have Tatum, but they got their butts kicked. OKC, they'll theoretically play them twice at full strength on the stretch here. And then they had like one kind of full strength matchup against San Antonio. They lost by double figures. So I think it's an incomplete picture. And ultimately from the East side, like they would only play one of these teams and it would be in the finals. And theoretically, if they made the finals, they've probably beaten San Antonio and OKC. So we're viewing the matchup a bit differently at that point. But yeah, I hear you. Like there's still like a final level of, let's call it the 660 and above club. OKC, San Antonio, and Detroit are all 730 win percentage or better. Boston's down at 660. But yeah, I mean, they've not fared well against like the top teams. And that's the final level for LA to prove down the stretch here. Fadil, thank you for the super chat. We lost this game, in my opinion, in the second quarter, 42-25. In my opinion, if we only get beat 32-25 in that quarter, we make the game easier. We need Herb and Watson. My question is, if LeBron is not back on the team, who can we get? I agree with you. The difference in this game was the second quarter. I mean, if you just look at it, like LA +4 in the first quarter, +11 in the third quarter, -1 in the fourth quarter. So they were in this game in the other three quarters. They just got shellacked down, during the second quarter. And remember, they also scored a 3 late in the quarter to make it, or maybe it wasn't a 3. They scored late in the second. So like it was actually even more lopsided until right before the half when they scored. So yeah, they lost this game in the second quarter. And really it was the non-Luka shift. I thought when Luka came out, that's when this game went off the rails. Like even with Luka's shooting struggles tonight, LA was +7 with him on the floor, which in 39 minutes, which means they were -10 in the 9 minutes he sat, and they really struggled in the non-Luka minutes tonight. So I agree with that assessment of the game. In terms of Herb and Watson, you're speaking my language. I would love both of those guys. If LeBron is not back, Herb and Watson are a couple of, I think, top targets at that point. Herb, could you get him for a first-round pick? If you're trading 2, I would love to throw Vando into that deal and say, hey, we'll give you a first for Herb and a first to get off Vando. And it like satisfies their want for a couple firsts for Herb, like optically, but the Lakers are getting off the Vando contract and getting Herb back. And then they could just straight up sign Watson to, depends how the rest of the season goes for him, but I think his floor is probably going to be around 25 million. A guy 6'8", 6'9", that two-way athleticism, the leap he has made as a scorer and as a shooter. He could play the 3 or the 4, a clear starter in the league moving forward. And I think, I don't know where he's ultimately going to slot at like the peak version of Watson, but I've talked about it before. Like, I think he could go one of two ways with his career. He could go down the Jeremy Grant path of go be the guy or the co-star in a lottery situation, put up your numbers, get your money, but not really maximize your potential, or go be the Aaron Gordon and take a step back, maybe offensively, but be the dirty work guy that you're overqualified to be, but you have the physical tools to be, and you're still the third or fourth option, depending on the team, depending on the situation. But if he comes to LA and does that, I mean, I think he'd be a great fit. If there's no LeBron, the Lakers are going to have 48 to 57 million. Those are the rough projections. It actually just came out before the game from Shams Charania of ESPN that the projected cap is now actually $1 million less, and that affects everything. So it's not a big decrease, but it is notable in that, let's just say the Lakers had between 48 to 57 million. That's now 47 to 56 million. So it drops a little bit there, right? And that's going to affect the apron, first apron, second apron, tax, all that stuff goes down by a little bit. So there's a little bit less money to play with by at least $1 million. But if there's no LeBron, I mean, they could do Herb and Watson. I think that would probably be somewhere between 40 to 45 of the, let's just say 47 to 56 million. So it would take up like a good 80, 85% of their cap between those guys. And then they'd still have a little bit left over to maybe you could use that space to re-sign Marcus Smart, re-sign Luke Kennard, use an exception on one of those two guys. You have bird rights on Jackson Hayes. You also re-sign Austin Reeves. So, and then there's the wild card of DeAndre Ayton and what happens with his player option. But yeah, I mean, I guess in that scenario, you could have something like, let's just say DA, Watson, Herb, Austin, Luka as your starting 5, and then off the bench, you almost certainly lose Rui in that scenario, but you could have like Marcus, Luke, Jake, Jackson, and then maybe you find like maybe a Do pops as the 10th guy, or you get a bargain minimum signing. And I think that 10-man rotation would be pretty good, but would cost you, I think, at least a first, if not two, for Herb. Though maybe you can get off that Vando contract, and maybe that, depending on what else isn't, like maybe it's Vando and DK and 2 firsts. And now you create a roster spot. You, I believe, shed a little bit of money between Vando and DK versus Herb. And then you get your starting 2-way wing. You also sign Watson, and you might, now you have an extra roster spot. You have maybe like a little bit more flexibility. And I think that would be a realistic, if the Lakers are willing to put the picks on the table, like a high-end realistic outcome, right? I think it's definitely more on the high end of how things can go, but I think it's within the parameters of being realistic. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. I really have an issue with the big 3 minutes. They look fatigued. Trust your bench and 2-way players more. You and me both. I mean, looking at this now, like I know they're shorthanded tonight, so it makes some sense, but the fact that all three played 39 plus minutes, Austin played 40 minutes, it's just too much. And maybe JJ is sensing that they're going to have this stretch here where they're playing 3 lottery teams, not just lottery teams, but record-wise, the 3 worst teams in the NBA. And he's looking at it like, okay, we should be able to rest these guys in the second half, in the fourth quarter, but I just think the minutes are too high. All 3 guys look tired tonight. Austin and LeBron just didn't have their legs in the first half offensively. Luka had his legs in the first half, then lost them in the second half. I think I mentioned he was 5 for 15 in the first half. So he actually was more efficient in the second half, went 6 for 14, but overall ended up with an inefficient 11 for 29. And yeah, I mean, I think all 3 of those guys just look really tired tonight, and it's something that the Lakers have to correct sooner than later, because Luka and Austin in particular are the 2 guys I think they've kind of been running them into the ground. And the last few games, I think you've seen some of the effects of that with their jumpers and just not having the same juice that they had at the beginning of this streak. And I think the coaching, like, I mean, you either have to like hold them out of a game, which I think is not ideal and could cost you a game, or do you reduce their minutes? It's like one of those two. But door number 3 of just keep playing them 38 to 40 minutes in these games. It's like, I get it. There's a ginormous gap between those 3 offensively and everybody else on this roster. I mean, your 4th best shot creator is between Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard, and like that gap between those guys and Austin or LeBron, whoever you want to put as the number 3 guy, that is a massive gap. So I understand part of the thinking with JJ, but I think he's overdoing it. And tonight, I mean, I just don't see, with where this team is at and the schedule they've had recently, I don't think there's any justification to any of those 3 playing more than like 37 minutes. I just, but to have all 3 of them play 39 and then Austin play 40, it's just, it's too high. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. LeBron inbounding late is a no-go. Just a short Luka slump, 1 game from tying his career 30-point streak. This game showed how vital Smart is for us. I agree on all of these. I think that's actually another area where the Lakers miss Smart. I think Smart has been their go-to inbounder, and what that also allows is one of their greatest strengths within some of these actions has been LeBron charging the middle of the floor. And you saw in the Orlando game him slipping out and getting that possession that ended up going out of bounds, and then they get the Kennard game winner. But I'm much more like LeBron as a catcher and finisher rather than as the inbounder, because to my point earlier and to this point, like, he has had several passes that have been stolen, tipped, etc., to the point where I think I would just much rather him be on the floor trying to make it. I mean, he's also one of your 2 to 3 best scorers. So it's like, I would like the big 3 plus Luke Kennard. Like that's my ideal 4 guys that are on the floor, is the big 3 plus Luke Kennard. Like, even taking away some of the inbound stuff with LeBron. Like I just would rather have your 4 best finishers, offensive players on the floor trying to make a play at the end of a game rather than, and LeBron's a really good screener as well. So I think not having Marcus was huge for that, but in general, Marcus, I mean, the plus minus, the defensive stuff, he's been a game changer for the Lakers. So not having him really hurt them tonight. As JJ said pregame, he's their best defender. I agree with that. He's their best defender, most impactful defender, and just not having him really compromise the defense tonight. Short Luka slump, I agree. I'm not going to overreact to the past couple games. He's been playing great basketball. Peter, appreciate you. You're great, Jovan, but your take that LA is not closer to San Antonio than 3 weeks ago is exotic. SAS 22-2 last 24 and just destroyed Miami 4-1. 4-1 San Antonio second round. Well, so I think the point I've been trying to make with this is, for me, it's more about LA than it is about San Antonio. It's not trying to take anything away from San Antonio, to be clear. I think it's more so my perception of LA has shifted. I said, I've already said this multiple times, my second round projection right now would be 4-2 San Antonio. So we're quibbling about a game. I think, my quick read would be, I think there's a Luka game where he just drops like 40, 45 and he single-handedly wins the game for the Lakers. And there's probably a game that's a close game that San Antonio, some of their lack of playoff experience shows a little bit. Like, this is not, for as great as San Antonio is, and I think right now they're the second best team in the NBA and should have the second highest championship odds, I would be pretty surprised if they play at the exact same level in the playoffs that they're at in the regular season. Now, can they get close to that? Can they have stretches of that? I think yes and yes. If San Antonio plays the same exact way and has the same net rating and the same on-off splits with Wemby, and then I will own that, that take. And then, if San Antonio plays the way they play in the regular season, they might sweep the Lakers. Like that's how great they've been in the regular season, especially in comparison to the Lakers. I just think that when you're the 2 players with, actually the 3 when you factor in Marcus, Harrison Barnes, I guess, is in there, but Marcus is a bigger part of the Lakers than Harrison Barnes is of the Spurs. The 3 players with the most playoff experience in that series are going to be on the Lakers side. And then, the Lakers, like DA's been to the finals, Austin's been to the conference finals and been to multiple postseasons. Rui's been to multiple postseasons. Vando, there's a giant playoff experience gap. Now, I think there's a overall depth and two-way talent and athleticism and defensive gap where I'm still picking the Spurs, but we're disagreeing here on a matter of a game. So, if you want to call that crazy, that's you are well within your right to that. But for me, it shifted from I would have picked the Spurs in 5 to now I picked the Spurs in 6. And I think the Lakers gained a game on them. If the Lakers close out the season strong, maybe they split, let's say they beat Cleveland and split the OKC games. Now I think that's, for me, more set in stone 2 games, and maybe they could push it to 7. And then at that point, who knows? But I understand, San Antonio, for me, second best team in the league. They have a real shot to beat OKC. They've matched up really well with them. I think Wemby's a top 5 player at a minimum, if not a top 4 player. Stephon Castle, I did a video on him earlier in the season saying I think he's a future All-Star and All-NBA guy. I'm very high on the Spurs. I think they're going to win at least a championship, if not a couple, over the next few years. I think young team in its first playoff run together, typically you lose round 2 or 3. So I'm not saying the Lakers are going to beat them. I'm just saying, for me, my projection is shifted by a game. And again, maybe that's an overreaction, and maybe the Lakers play them and get swept or lose in 5. And I would love to continue the conversation, and we could dissect it at that point. Fadil, thank you for the super chat. Would this work financially? Luka, AR, Herb, Rui, Kessler, Smart, Kobe White. I call him Kobe Wright. Kobe White. Adu, Vando, Hayes, Ayton, Kennard, Laravia, Timmy, Bronny. It says Kobe White is an unrestricted free agent. Anyway, we could sign someone at the 4. All right, so some quick math here. Kessler's going to be a 30+ million, and realistically, I think to poach him from Utah, you probably got to hit 32 or 35 million. You're going to have to overpay a little bit to pull Kessler. Rui, really interested to see what, I don't see his market being above the non-taxpayer MLE, and even then, he's not been playing his best basketball lately, and I just wonder how the rest of the season goes with him. He's kind of a wild card for me, but I think he'll be in the 12 to 15. Like, I will project closer to 15 million, and that probably being his ceiling. But I mean, the Lakers can go over, if there's competition for him, they could technically offer him like 16, 17 and just outbid the competition. Herb's at, I believe, around like 14 or so. So, I mean, just between Herb and Kessler, you're almost at 50 million, depending on how much you pay Kessler. Kobe White, I think Kobe White probably gets the non-taxpayer from somebody. So I'm talking through this, reacting to this live right now. I don't think this is realistic. I think it's going to be tough to, I mentioned this, like, I think it's going to be tough to have Smart and Kennard. If you're somehow pulling off Smart and Kennard, I don't think it's possible to have Rui, Smart, and Kennard. I think you're going to lose at least one of those 3, if not all 3. But to keep all 3 plus add Kobe White, I just don't see that being a possibility. And also, part of that flexibility is based on the possibility of Ayton opting out, not Ayton staying. So I think like the goal here would be to get Herb and Kessler. And for me, then I would prioritize Smart over, I would go Smart, Rui, Kennard in terms of my priorities. But Kennard is going to be much cheaper than Rui, maybe even half the price, even less than half the price of Rui. So I say all that to say, like, I think you prioritize the big pieces first, which are, if you could get Kessler and Herb Jones, I think it's a home run off season, but it is going to cost you at least one of the Rui, Smart, Kennard trio, if not 2 of them. And then you also, unless Kobe White's taking a massive discount as like a minimum guy or an exception guy and like a lower exception guy, I just don't think it's possible. Like, you'd have to get off if you could get off the Vando contract in the Herb Jones trade, that might give you a little bit more flexibility here. But as for like this basic construction, I think you'd probably lose Kobe White. And then I think the 2 guys that would probably be gone in this scenario are Rui and Kobe White. I think you could still keep Smart, and you could probably still find a way to keep Kennard, but you're not keeping all 3 of those guys and adding someone else when you've already added 2 big pieces in Kessler and Herb from like a financial perspective, if that makes sense. Bleach, or is it Bleached NX, I think? I hope I didn't botch that. They're going to surprise in the playoffs if they play the right way. They can beat San Antonio, OKC. All comes down to heart and effort. They have enough to make a deep run. I think they have enough to make a deep run. I am not as optimistic on the OKC matchup, but I'll know, like, when I talk, because I talk to fans a lot, obviously, just based on the show, but also privately, or if I run into someone, like, but whenever OKC comes up, I think the 2 things that people bring up the most are Luka beating them in 2024 and the 1-in-1 stretch that they had against them at the end of last season, when the one game Luka obviously got ejected, that was, it got rescinded. It was a BS ejection, but we'll never know. Like, Lakers could have gone 2-0. They were up at the time Luka got ejected with like 7 minutes left in the 4th quarter. However, both of those things are not from this season. And I'm more of a what have you done for me lately type of basketball person, where yes, Luka had his success against OKC in 2024, that was in a much different roster that was more optimized around Luka. And like this group has looked more optimized around Luka, has been playing better around Luka, but it's still not the same group that he had in 2024. Like in some ways they're better, in some ways they're worse, right? I think their offensive ceiling is higher. I think the defensive ceiling and floor is lower than that 2024 Mavs team. But then also last year, like the Lakers were worse offensively and better defensively last year. Now they've been better offensively and worse defensively. So it's just like different pieces. And I don't want to be like, well, I think they could beat OKC because they beat them last season at the end of the regular season. It's like, no, they went into OKC. Both teams were without one of their big three. Lakers got dog walked in the first half. The game was basically over by the end of the first quarter. Then they had another matchup where no Shea and AJ Mitchell, no Luka, and that one was actually close. Lakers had a big comeback in that third quarter, and they had a chance to win the game, and they lost in the clutch. But I mean, I would not say either one of those games gave me like more confidence than that they could like beat OKC. If anything, I think there's more of a gap between them than there was last season, and that there was between Dallas and OKC in 2024. I think this OKC team is better than last season and 2 seasons ago. And I mean, this Lakers team can get to that 2024 Mavericks level, but they still have a ways to go to get there, right? Like they still need to show more over the stretch here. But San Antonio, I think they could, that to me could be a 6 or 7 game series, and that could be a series that the Lakers win. So I would say I'm like halfway there with you. OKC, I still think OKC would be a heavy favorite. Now, I leave some room here of if they beat OKC or they show like maybe they go 1-1, or maybe it's like 2 close losses. Okay, that's a different story, and we can then dissect what went well, what didn't. But OKC, I think, is still like kind of tailor-made to beat this team with the way they're constructed and their style of play. Lake Slow 82, thank you for the super chat. The refs are indefensible at this point. To be honest, why should we watch the league when it's not officiated fairly? Why should the players put up with this? I mean, look, the last couple of games have been rough on the Lakers side. With the Orlando game, I'm just double checking here. I mean, it's tough because I think the Lakers are one of the toughest teams to officiate in the league because they draw a lot of contact with just their style of play, with how teams guard Luka, how teams guard Austin, how teams guard LeBron, with the Lakers' ability to create advantages consistently. It's like you could call probably a foul on every defensive possession against the Lakers. And then on the other side, the Lakers don't foul a lot. So I think there has been something of an overcorrection, I think, from the officiating where like the Lakers often have a margin. And I think the margin is mostly fair because of their style of play on both ends. Like the Lakers, I mean, earlier in the season, it was more so they were playing such bad defense that they weren't even in position to foul teams necessarily. But like the Lakers just don't foul and they draw a lot of contact. So that leads to giant free throw discrepancies. And I know teams have complained about it, and teams have sent in footage and have complained after games about, and this isn't even like a this season thing. This is like a multi-season thing at this point. But it's specific, like teams are it's funny because fan bases and teams are often on the opposite end of this, where they feel like the Lakers get the benefit of the whistle. They feel like the Lakers are the ones who have the refs in their pocket. But certainly some games lately have gone against the Lakers. I mean, if we let's look at post All-Star break, the Lakers in terms of free throw attempts have not been the same team. If you look at it quickly here, they're tied for 7th with Detroit in free throw attempts per game. But before that, they were 2nd going into the All-Star break. So there's been a decrease of almost 2 attempts per game for LA. And I honestly think part of it is like the Lakers just complain a lot collectively. And JJ's on the refs, Luka's on the refs, LeBron's on the refs, Austin's on the refs, Marcus is on the refs, Jackson's on the refs. Those I think are the primary culprits. But if you put yourself in the ref shoes, like if I was a ref, I would not want to ref a Lakers game because it's like there's all this contact and stuff going on, which is like the style of play. But then there's also like if you don't call a foul, then they get upset with you, and then you have to like deal with that. And I think there's almost been an overcorrection against them, in my opinion, just like eye test wise, but also backed up by some of the data. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, there's been a lot of ref frustration this year from seemingly like every fan base and every team. And I think that that's something that the NBA has to fix because there's so much inconsistency with, I mean, JJ's touched on it all season where he will call out like, this was called this way in this game, and then tonight it's called a different way. And like, just the lack of applying the rules in the same context night after night after night. And look, I think the Lakers have gotten the short end of the stick recently. And even in some of these games, like the last two games, they technically outshot their opponents at the free throw line. I still think they got the short end of the officiating stick in both of those games. So I don't know what the answer is here, but I understand the frustration because the Lakers have certainly, I think they've benefited a lot from the officiating throughout the season, and they've been officiated properly. But I think more recently, they've been on the shorter end of that stick. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. You think AR's injury is lingering, good enough to play but not be 100%? He's been like 1.5 out of 5 great games, not just D, but also from threes. Like Smart is somewhat more important than Reeves for this team. I think, just to be clear, I'm not reporting anything. This is just my read. I think Austin's playing through stuff. I mean, he's often playing through stuff, but he's just not like tonight. I thought in that first half, he goes 2 for 8. I thought several of those shots were good shots and he created separation, or it was like a driving kick. And he's like, I mean, I think he had an air ball and then he has a couple shots that are barely grazing the rim. And like, that's been a trend with him lately where he just has not had his legs. And I know he was dealing with a wrist thing coming out of the Denver thing and the Denver loss. And I mean, so I'm, to be clear, I'm not making excuses for him. Like if you're out there, you got to perform. That's it. If you're actually hurt and you can't perform, then sit out until you feel like you can perform, right? You got to judge guys ultimately by, if you're out there, you're going to be judged for your performance out there, regardless of the context. Because if you can play through it and you're playing through it, then like you got to, and to be fair, I think he's had a few rough games lately. Like right before the road trip, he was playing great. First few games of the road trip, not as great. I think like 2 of the last 3 games, he's looked more like himself. But yeah, I mean, he's not, to me, been the same player recently. And I think there's a war of attrition. If not an injury, I think there's like a war of attrition where like he kind of needs a break here, whether it's resting a game or reduced minutes, like something, because he's just not quite looked like himself. Smart versus Austin. I think Smart is the 4th most important player for the team. And that even depends on the night because DA, if DA brings it at a certain level, like he could rise to a different level. But I still think Austin and LeBron are more important because I think when those guys are playing at a certain level, it elevates this team. Like for as great as Luka is, and look, he can do it by himself to a degree, but like Luka needs help, right? And the best version of this team, I still think, is like if all 3 of those guys are hitting 25 plus points and each have like at least 6-7 assists, that to me is like the sweet spot offensively for them, right? And it's probably going to look something like Luka's got 35 and 7-8 assists. LeBron's got maybe 22, 24, 7-8 assists. Austin's got 26, 27, 5-6 assists, right? Like that's probably closer to a realistic distribution there. But I like this team's going to ultimately win, I think, with their offense. They need to be at a baseline level defensively, but the Lakers' superpower is their offense. Their superpower is they have the best 3-man offensive combination in the league, right? Like, or that's supposed to be their strength. So I still think the big 3 are the most important players, but I would say Marcus is their most important role player and their most important defender, and should almost always be the fourth guy out there with the big three. Now, I mean, we could debate it. Like, I think they need both to win, right? So could they win without Marcus or could they win without Austin? Like, sure. But if if they don't have both those guys and both of those guys aren't playing well, they're very susceptible, I think, to losing in round one. iPod Kills, thank you for the super chat. I missed the 1920 Lakers. They were very physical. Yes, that was a really fun team. This team has been playing more physical lately, but it's not part of their makeup. It's not who they are naturally outside of maybe Marcus, Jake, Vando, Jackson to a degree. But I think LeBron, Luka, Austin, DA have all been better in that regard lately. I think Luka's a very physical player on the offensive end. And then Austin will take charge. They'll both take charges. LeBron is a physical. They've got physicality. I just think collectively it's not the 1920 Lakers. And that group had a certain floor defensively. JR Madrano, thank you for the super chat. I don't know about a chip this year, but does feel like a foundational year does this feel like a foundational year going into next season? 07-08 season vibes, especially if the big three stay intact. Yes, I think that is a great way to frame this. I know what Laker fans want. Laker fans want championships. They're accustomed to championships, and they have a great reason to be accustomed to championships because they've won a lot of championships, and that is the standard of this organization. So I understand a lot of the championship talk and outlook here, but I still think the Lakers are somewhere between the fourth to sixth best team in the league. Can you win a title as the fourth to sixth best team? Yes, because I think if you go back to like the 2011 Mavs or the 2019 Raptors or even maybe the Bucks were probably held in higher, like 2022 Warriors, right? Like I think there are teams that if you're doing a power ranking at the end of the season were definitely outside the top three, maybe even in some cases outside the top five, and had the right core, the right star, the right infrastructure to go on a run and win a championship. So I think the Lakers fall into like that bucket of there's a chance. I would say it's a pretty low probability. A lot of things have to break right, but they are coming together at the right time. They are showing the signs, and especially if they continue this through the rest of the regular season, they beat Cleveland, they split OKC. Okay, like now we have over a month sample of them beating basically all the best teams in the league, with the exception of Detroit and Boston and San Antonio because they didn't play them. And it's like, okay, like they've shown something here. But to your point about being a foundational season, yeah, I mean, I think we have proof of concept now with the Luka Austin pairing, like with Luka as the head of the snake, with Austin as his sidekick, with some of like what Marcus and DA and Jackson and Rui and Luke can all do in supporting cast roles. So yeah, I think it's still going to be evaluating like how they close the season and how guys perform in the playoffs. And then to your point about like the big three potentially staying intact, if we still don't know, is LeBron playing next year? Is he not? Does he want to be in LA? Does he not? What are the Lakers going to potentially offer him? A lot of things up in the air with that. But if they bring LeBron back and they bring back most of the group and maybe just make a swap or two with the starting group, I think they can build off of their success this season. Eccentric Taste, thank you for the super chat. Thanks for calling out a glaring issue. The usage rate and lack of trust for the bench players is an issue. JJ is number one Lakers Achilles heel. I agree with the first part. I don't know that I would go as far as to say JJ is the Lakers Achilles heel. I think when it comes down to it, like one of the things we saw down the stretch tonight was just, even without Cade, the Lakers just could not get consistent enough defensive stops. They did not execute the best offensively, and they missed some good looks. But when Detroit, once it got into the clutch and Detroit needed to execute at a certain level offensively, the Lakers really struggled with the point of attack defense, with the rotating, with the defensive rebounding. Like all these things added up to Detroit out executing them down the stretch. So I think for me, the Achilles heel of this group still comes back down to, I don't think they have enough defensive talent. And especially with the rotation that, like, if you look at it through this lens of JJ shortening the rotation and JJ only trusting so many people, if we actually look at like the top 7, which is debatable, but in my opinion, it's probably the starters plus Rui and Luke. That group just does not have a lot of defensive talent in that top 7, especially compared to what OKC's throwing out there, what San Antonio's throwing out there, even what like Minnesota and Houston are throwing out there. Now, that doesn't mean the Lakers can't beat those teams because they don't have a certain level of defensive talent. But I think at some point it comes back to bite them of just, I mean, you could argue that among that top 7, like Marcus is the only guy you can count on to 100% be an above average defensive performer that night. I think Luka has been great defensively going on like, month plus, and has been very consistent. So maybe you want to put Luka as like an above average contributor. I think LeBron has been better on that end as well. Like they've been trending upward, but still the best version of like Luka, LeBron, and Austin is not in the same realm as the best version of Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert. Like teams just have more defensive firepower and overall talent. And San Antonio has Castle and Wemby and several two-way guys in the rotation. So I come back to the defensive side in the roster and I just say this group of like the top 7, top 8 of who JJ trusts most just don't have enough defensive guys in that group. And if you're going with a big 3-star model, you need to have nothing but like high motor, two-way energy defenders around them. And in the primary rotation, you could argue they might only have one of those guys in Marcus. It's not Rui. It's not Luke. Jake has regressed as a shooter. And then like DA and Jackson have been maybe trending up on the defensive side, but they still have a lower defensive ceiling than Wemby, Hartenstein, Chet, Rudy Gobert, etc. Like they're not in the same class as those guys. So I keep coming back to the roster and the defense, and that's not on JJ. That's on the front office and how they built the team. But I also think JJ, to your point, like go back to game 4 of the first round and the way that he handled that second half. He's got to trust the bench more. He's got to trust the starters to be able to rest a little bit longer. And going back to, the Orlando game, Luka played 38, Austin played 40. So Austin's played 40 in back-to-back games. Luka's played 38 and 39 minutes in back-to-back games. Luka's been they're running Luka into the ground right now. Look at Luka's last 7 games, 37 minutes, 43, 40, 38, 38, 38, 39. That's too many minutes. That's too many regular season minutes. I know like the non-Luka minutes have been a struggle, but you got to find a different way to survive other than just play Luka more, because those are playoff minutes. Like, maybe a little bit lower. Luka will probably be 40, 41 minutes in the playoffs. But yeah, I agree. I don't put it all on JJ. I put it partly on the roster construction, and I still think the defense is a bigger issue, but he's got to be better with that. Johnny, 92, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan, with 12 seconds to go. Jenkins hits 2 free throws. JJ had a chance to use his last time out, have the last shot to potentially win the game. What are your thoughts? Should he have used it? So I'm pulling up. Just want to check the box or play-by-play quickly here. So after Jenkins' second timeout, the second free throw, Lakers did call timeout, and then they ran that sideline out of bounds play. What you might be confusing that with is when Jenkins made the step back with 25 seconds left, and then the Lakers did not call timeout and instead let the clock run into Luka eventually. Now, I think the advantage to that was that Kevin Huerter was on the floor. Like, that play kind of played out the way you wanted in terms of Luka targeted Kevin Huerter, created separation, and had a 13-foot jumper right there in like the elbow, paint area, and just missed it. But from a process perspective, there was a subpar defender on the floor. Luka targeted that defender. Luka got a good shot. Luka just missed the shot. Then the Pistons got the rebound. They had a foul. Jenkins made both free throws. Lakers called timeout and then ran the final play. So I think, and you're not the only person who said this. I've seen another variation of this question or this sentiment. Like, the Lakers did call timeout after the final Jenkins free throws with 9 seconds left. And that was off of Luka missing with 12 seconds left. But they could have called a timeout after Jenkins' step back jumper over Austin with 25 seconds left, and they chose not to. So that could be something you quibble with, and I understand that. I mentioned it earlier. I've not, now that like a lot of people have been pointing out JJ's timeout management, I think it could be better, but I'm also kind of like used to it now of he has his philosophy and he wants the guys to figure it out in the moment. And I think from a process perspective, they still got a pretty good look with Luka. He just didn't make it. Tommen, thank you for the super chat. Smart was super missed tonight. Respectfully, Rui doesn't fit this team. 2026, 27, Luka, AR, Watson, Braun, Ayton, Smart, Luke, Herb, Jay Collins, Jackson, Robert Williams. Agree. Smart was super missed tonight. I am starting to, I don't want to write Rui off entirely, but I think Rui has become a little bit more expendable. I just think, like, if you look at this stretch here, he has not been like a huge part of it. And I talked about it last game. Now, his minutes were reduced in the Orlando and Miami games in part due to injury, but he has been trending down for 5 consecutive games from a minutes perspective. And if we go back to, he definitely contributed more like earlier in the win streak, like had 13 points, a couple threes against Indiana, 13 points, 7 rebounds, 3 threes against New York, and 15 points, 3 threes against Chicago. Played 40 minutes that game. But as starting with the Denver game, the Lakers started to tighten the rotation. That was the game where they cut it to 9 and have kept it at 9, with the exception of like tonight playing Maxey as the 10th guy to close the game. Otherwise, it's been 9 for the past 5 games. And that has coincided with Rui's minutes going down, his role decreasing, his usage decreasing, and he has not shot as well or played as well. Went 0 for 3 against Denver on threes, 0 for 2 against Houston, 2 for 2 against Houston, 1 for 2 against Miami, didn't attempt a 3 against Orlando. So the second half of this run, the final 5 games, he progressively played a smaller role and or did not play as well. So where I'm at more with him is I don't think he's a starter on this team, even projecting out to next season. I think the best version, I think ideally the only 2 players on this team, or 3, excuse me, depending on what happens with LeBron, like you have the big 3 and everybody else is a bench player on next year's version of this team. And I would ideally, if you're bringing back LeBron, I want a new starting 3 and a new starting 5. If you're not bringing back LeBron, I want a new starting 3, 4, and 5. I don't think Rui fits into that. He could maybe be a placeholder for like a year, but you're not signing him to a short-term deal. You're almost certainly signing him to at least a 2-year deal, if not a 3-year deal. So maybe depending on that price, you could have him as a starter next year and then move him into a bench role. But I think I've made this point before, unless you have a very particular roster build, I think Rui's more of a bench player than a starter. right now the Lakers don't have that roster build. I think you need a really good defensive center and a really good starting defensive wing to make Rui. Like, I think Rui needs to be hidden in the front court, whereas the Lakers have often featured him in the front court as a defender. And I think that's just a allocation of his skill set and defensive capabilities. So I'm getting there a little bit more with Rui. Like, ultimately, if you can get a Watson or a Herb, I move on from Rui easily. As for your projection here, Luka, AR, Watson, Braun, Ayton. Really interested to see what Braun's number would be in this scenario. Is it 15 million, 20 million, 25 million? What's Watson getting? I think he's getting at least 25. But if you're poaching him, it's probably going to be closer to 30. Ayton, let's just say hypothetically, he's opting in here. So just with Watson and Braun, I mean, you're getting pretty close to like 45 to 50 million. Herb, I guess theoretically you would be doing the like trading the Vando trade where you trade a couple firsts. Smart and Luke. So this is where it gets, I don't think you could pull Smart, Luke, and John Collins. I think at this point, if you're adding Watson, keeping Braun, and also adding Herb, I think you probably lose at least one of Luke or Collins. I think it's tough to pull off that. It might not even really be feasible to keep Smart and Luke with some of the other moves. So I like this. I think you probably lose Luke. Let's just say hypothetically in this scenario, Collins is actually, I think Collins is going to be a double-digit millions guy. He's probably going to be in that like non-taxpayer MLE range. So actually Collins, unless Braun is coming back on like a minimum, I don't think you're able to pull off this bench. So I would probably say Collins is unrealistic here. And then depending on Braun's number, you might even have to pick between, you might just like lose Luke as well. So like that's kind of my general point is like, when we talk through some of the roster stuff, if you're adding, in this case scenario, they're adding two notable guys in Watson and Herb, and you're also keeping LeBron. If you're doing that, you're basically down to like keeping Marcus and like basically nothing else other than like minimum guys. And Luke could be a minimum guy, but I think he's going to make a little bit more than that. John Collins is not a minimum guy. Robert Williams could be a minimum guy just based on his injury track record. So I really like the Robert Williams part of this, but I think I would say most of the roster projections that people are giving right now, they have 1 to 2 higher level role players than are realistic if the Lakers are adding the starters. Like, I'm more of the thinking they're probably adding the starters and then like the bench depth is still not great. But if there's better starters and better fitting starters, they're in a better position. If there's also a scenario where they could just add like more depth, but if it's more like bench depth, then you still kind of have the starting group situation where it's not like optimized. Where this, I mean, adding Watson as the third guy, I think would be great. And then Ayton, if he's making $8 million, like I would still rather have like a Kessler or Nick Claxton, but Ayton on $8 million is solid. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Biggest concern I have is the defensive rebounding after good defense. Also, I think AR and Luka should have been subbed out on the last defensive possession. I agree on the defensive rebounding. It's been a real issue for LA lately. And I think part of it has been as they are scrambling, rotating, doubling, trapping, playing a more aggressive scheme at times, or more zone, that naturally just leads to more offensive rebounding opportunities for the opponent because you're not necessarily matched up. Especially if you're putting two on the ball. You're putting two on the ball, automatically you've got a 4-on-3 behind the play. So that's like in general, the Lakers, I mean, this has been an issue for them at times in terms of boxing out and not giving up offensive rebounds, even like earlier in the season. So they've actually been a good defensive rebounding team for the totality of the season. They've not been a good defensive rebounding team post All-Star break. And even during this stretch, they've been one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the league, actually. And that's something that they got to address. In terms of AR and Luka, I think part of the reason they were out there was, so you're saying the play coming out of the timeout, I would assume, So we're talking about the Pistons, like Austin scores. So one thing I also, just to kind of add some context to this, I believe the Lakers might have only had one timeout. So if JJ called that timeout with 12 seconds, with 25 seconds left, I could be mistaken on that. They might have had two more timeouts. I think they only had one more timeout. It's not showing me here on the box score. But if they only had one more timeout, I think that's more defensible that he didn't call it then, because he wanted to save it for because let's just say he calls timeout, they run a great play, they score again. Well, now you got to get a stop. And if you get a stop, you want an opportunity to try and score on the other end. But then if they also score, you need an opportunity to try and score on the other end. So I think he was trying to time it with the flow of the game down the stretch, like to have the final timeout, which he did use with the 9 seconds left. As for your point, I think if you are playing it the way that the Lakers played it, the fear in that case would be if you took Luka or Austin out, if you're not planning on calling a timeout, even if they score, which the Lakers did not, then you run the risk of having an offensive possession without one of your, at least for this game, top two scorers, top two options, and you're now in a tough spot offensively. So also then you theoretically, like if you're going defensive, there's no Luke out there either. So now you're maybe with a lineup of, let's say the Lakers got to stop there, or let's just say same thing happens with Jenkins, and he scores, but like Vando, the Lakers are trying to execute it the same way. So it's like DA, LeBron, Luka, Vando, and Jake are out there. Now you're running back down the court, whether they make or miss. You're not trying to call a timeout because you're trying to save it for the final 5 to 10 seconds. And you're trying to run a final play there or penultimate play with Luka, LeBron, DA, Vando, and Jake. Like, that's not the way you want to be executing offensively down the stretch, right? But the flip side of this is like, you got to get the stop. And they did not put their best defensive lineup out there, and they did not get the stop. So like, I think there's a little bit of hindsight 2020, but if they had one timeout, which I believe they did, I understand JJ's logic to a degree, because if you call the timeout after the Jenkins then okay, now you have 25 seconds. Shot clock and game clock are basically the same at that point. Clearly, though, the Lakers didn't want to run it down to the final possession. They wanted to go quickly, and that's why Luka went and attacked Herter. So, I mean, you could have called timeout and brought those guys back in, or one of those guys back in. But then at that point, if you miss and now you have to foul, instead of being able to run that play from the sideline, you're now 9 seconds left. You have to go the length of the court, and they can press you, and it's a 3-point game. So you have to hit a three. It gives them more time to intentionally foul you. Like I understand that to a degree if they only had one timeout, which again, I think they did. Next one from Ahmed Braun. Just by the way, I'm going to go like 5 more minutes here and then wrap at like 9:30 mark. Ahmed Braun, thank you for the super chat. That was a frustrating game to watch officiating wise. Shout out to Natalie Sago though. LOL, we missed Smart big time tonight. I didn't know he was this huge for us. Marcus is huge for the Lakers. I mean, their record, I'm actually going to pull it up. But their record without Marcus is, he's been indispensable for this team this season. But pulling it up here, Marcus. Well, okay. I swear, Basketball Reference only gives me issues. So they're 1-1, 2. It's funny. They're actually 4-1, 4-2, 5-2, 5-3, 6-3, 6-4, 7-4. They're 7-5 without Marcus. So yeah, I mean, and the losses have been Detroit, San Antonio. That was the game they punted. Boston, Phoenix, and yeah. So yeah, Phoenix, Boston, San Antonio. I thought there was another loss that I'm not. Okay. Oh, on Portland, that game at the beginning of the season. So, yeah. They've lost to Boston, San Antonio, and Phoenix, and Detroit. So, yeah, they've lost to some good teams without him. A couple of those games, they were shorthanded, so it wasn't just Marcus out, but Marcus is huge. Wise Music says Smart would have killed tonight. 100% agree. I think the Lakers win this game if they have Marcus. Seeing... Oh, Moses Moody. Uh-oh. What happened with Moses Moody? I'm afraid to see this. Ooh. Oh, that is bad. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah, prayers up for Moody. That stinks. That sucks. That's unfortunate. Golden 24, with how good DA and Smart have been lately, which starter should we upgrade for next season? I think both is ideal, but lean towards the wing and have Smart off the bench. Yes, I would agree. I would say ideally they both come off the bench. And I think at this point of his career, DA is more of like an elite level backup center. And I think Marcus is in a really good third guard or really good, bench two-way guard / wing, however you want to, label him. But between the two, I would agree with you because I think wings are more at a premium and it's harder to find like true two-way wing talent. And I mean, the Lakers have not really found it going on almost 5 years now. So, with Max developed into it, but he was only really that for the Lakers for like a couple months before they traded him. DFS and Marcus, they both added like post prime. Marcus has been really effective and has been great for them. It's just, this isn't like the defensive player of the year, Marcus, although he's been really good on that end. And then DFS, they were a couple years too late in terms of his like wing perimeter defense. He was actually more effective as like a rim protector in the small ball groups. So like they've struggled to identify that type of talent. So I would say, as much as I would love a center upgrade on DA, I would even say if there's a way to add a better player than Marcus, move Marcus into a bench role. And who knows, maybe he's even like the sixth man and sometimes closing option, depending on the matchup. Like I would much prefer that than the alternative of like upgrading DA. But I mean, now it's tough because I think Smart's been better than DA on the season, and the lineup data has really supported that as well in terms of just like his impact. So you could, like, the counterpoint would be actually upgrading DA and just keeping Marcus as the fourth guy with the perimeter group is more of an upgrade than like keeping DA and upgrading the Marcus spot. But I just think in general, again, if you look at the price that a guy like a Peyton Watson or a Tari Eason is about to go for in free agency, and then you also look at just the prices for a Jaden McDaniels, a Tamani Kamara, a Herb Jones, those types of guys around the league, you got to pay a premium to acquire that type of primary wing defender. And I think you could probably get more away with having like a bargain bin center rotation than a bargain bin wing rotation. And so, to be clear, I would prefer both of those guys be in bench roles and upgrade both of them. But from a practical perspective of like what's maybe the greater need or what's the harder thing to acquire, I still think a true two-way wing in that 6'7" to 6'9" range is more important and harder to acquire than the center. Because like DA has had good moments. It's just the issue with DA has been the lack of consistency and sometimes letting his offensive role dictate how hard he plays. And when he does not do that, and when he plays the Clint Capella role that he has not always wanted to play this season, he's been awesome in it. It's just been like not every night. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think ideally both guys are bench guys. The more we know, hey, Jovan, the top teams in the East and West have physical teams / defenses. How can LA be like that? Is it culture, coaching, or you need 15 Marcuses? I would say 15 Marcuses is better than 15 Gabes, for those who remember the quote from JJ last year that he would love. I think he said 12 Gabe Vincent. So maybe you have 12 Gabe Vincents plus the big three. Okay, maybe, but no, that would not work. I think it's a combination of culture, coaching, and roster personnel. To this point, I think the Lakers have been better from a physicality perspective lately. And I put that on Lakers culture. I put that on the coaching staff, and I put that on the play, like some of the players leading the way, but also some of the players buying into roles or doing more the dirty, like tonight. Luka dives on the ground for the loose ball in the first quarter, and you have several hustle plays like DA on the offensive glass. Vando is everywhere. Jackson defensively, like that's not 15 Marcus Smarts, but those guys are making plays out there, and it's coming from a hustle, culture that the team is trying to build. I think the toughest thing is like, just like any habit, if you think about it, like I'm sure we all have our habits that we try to build, whether it's getting up earlier, going to bed earlier, going to the gym more, eating healthier, whatever. Like if one of those things does not come naturally to you, it takes time to build that habit and to build that tendency. And so for the Lakers, I think several of their guys, like DA and Rui, do not play hard every game, every possession. Like you need to be on DA and Rui and incentivizing them to play. But so like with DA, it's his offensive role. When DA gets touches early, when DA is involved in the offense, DA plays better. With Rui, for a time, it was Rui starting. But now I think it's more so Rui playing a certain amount of minutes and like potentially closing games. But those guys, you need to incentivize them. You need to dangle the carrot in their face to get them to play hard. Some guy, Marcus Smart, Jake LaRavia, Vando, those guys just roll the ball out. They're going to play hard. They're going to make some mistakes, and they are offensively limited to a degree, but they're going to play as hard as they possibly can. The big three, I think they have fluctuated in how hard they play, but they're carrying such a massive offensive load collectively that it's understandable that there's going to be some fluctuation defensively. But I think all three guys, to their credit, have been more locked in, have been playing harder. And there's some nights they just don't have the legs, they don't have maybe the focus on a given night. But I think they all have been, for their individual defensive ceilings, they've all been leaning into that. So I think it's a combination. Like the Lakers have built a culture of resiliency. Even tonight, go down 13 at the half, don't give up, go on a big run in the third, and then are trading baskets in the fourth, ultimately come up short, but nearly pull off the win. So that's on the culture of the team, that's on the coaching staff, and getting the guys to buy in and try to be greater than the sum of their parts defensively and in the 50-50 game. And then Marcus setting a big example with this, but several of the other guys buying in and playing above their kind of collective nature. And I think it's trending in the right direction. Ultimately, though, you do need the right pieces, and you do need, I think, a more consistent and established culture. And that's something that we've seen. They've kind of fast-tracked in San Antonio. In OKC, they've been building that for years, and they just won the championship. A team like Boston has built that over the years and won a championship a couple years ago. Detroit has had a quick turnaround here over a couple of years. New York has been building for a few years. Cleveland's been building for a few years, though they obviously have remade their team with the Harden trade. So this stuff takes time, but I think the Lakers are headed in the right direction. It just might be more of a next season thing than this season. And then I got 3 final super chats here. Then I am going to wrap. Stump 4522. Lakers most likely end up facing Denver or Wolves again based on current standings first round. Their best chance if they get Rockets first round. I agree. I think it might. Well, Houston just had a bad loss to Chicago tonight. So Houston's actually technically the 6th seed right now, though that's partly based on they played 1 fewer game than both Denver and Minnesota. And so, there's almost a 3-way tie there for the 4 seed. Right now, Denver and Minnesota are tied for the 4 seed. Denver has the tiebreaker. Denver would be the home team. Like for the Lakers, I would say this current bracket is probably the best case scenario for the Lakers, where they get Houston in round 1. Denver hosts Minnesota. I mean, it doesn't really matter, I guess, either way. It actually might be better if Minnesota hosts Denver. So, I'll take that back. Probably better if Denver hosts Minnesota, because that gives Denver a better chance of coming out. And I think Denver would give OKC a harder run for their money than Minnesota would, as we just saw last postseason. Denver took them to 7 and nearly could have won it in 6. Minnesota got shellacked in 5 games. So I think best case scenario for the Lakers is play Houston round 1, have Denver and Minnesota beat each other up, but then one of those teams advances, beats up OKC. Either one of those teams wins or they just beat up OKC. It's a long 6-7 game series. And then San Antonio maybe has a tougher than expected first round series with Phoenix, who has played them decently this season. LA plays San Antonio round 2, and they at least make that a competitive series, if not win it. And then they play, maybe they don't even play OKC. Maybe Denver beats OKC, then they play Denver in the conference finals. Like, just go through like the hypothetical, like best path for LA. But right now, at least from a seeding perspective, I think the 1 through 6 is lined up perfectly, where they play Houston and then they put Denver, Minnesota, and OKC on the same side. Cause I think Denver or Minnesota, could give OKC some trouble in that second round, especially in comparison to if like Houston were somehow like the worst case scenario would be somehow like Denver's the 6th seed, LA plays them in round 1. That's a long series that I think they could potentially lose. And then like maybe Houston beats Minnesota and just gets gets destroyed by OKC in round 2. Lakers somehow beat Spurs, but now they're playing like a rested OKC in the conference final. So I think right now the bracket is looking good, but I think Houston has the easiest schedule. So to your point, they might be the least likely from that perspective, but they're also playing the worst basketball of those 3 teams. So I do have a feeling right now, for me, it's between Houston and Minnesota as the most likely, because Ant is still out. I know he's going to be back soon, but Minnesota hasn't been quite right. Denver just got healthy. They've won a couple games. They're looking a little better. I think Denver ends up in the 4-5, and then it's a matter of Minnesota or Houston. And then next one, Keon Park. Thank you for the super chat. If we lose our players and don't get new 3-and-Ds, do Lakers need to fill the roster even with minimum players, or just have 5 to 7 and fill later, like after season starting? Good question. You need a roster minimum of 12. I think it's 12 guys technically, but it's 12 guys up to like late into the summer. And then to start the season, I believe you need 14 players under contract. So they would need to get to 12 at some point in the and even if you're under 12, there are these things called empty roster charges. So that's something I've talked about before, where let's just say the Lakers have 7 guys under contract. You're still being charged, like each player has their cap hold unless you rescind the rights. So that's been something I've talked about, where, for example, with LeBron has a massive cap hold. It's over $50 million. So the Lakers do not have any cap space unless they rescind the rights to LeBron or re-sign him quickly to a lesser deal. But I think the most likely scenario would be rescinding his rights. And then if they re-sign him, technically they rescinded the rights. So like they're, signing him as like a free agent, but it would be like post rescinding the rights, having the cap space, and then figuring out what moves they're doing and then keeping LeBron. So if you're under the 12 players, again, if you have 7, you have 5 empty roster charges, which It depends on the cap, how much the fake charges, but it's typically around like 1.1, 1.2 million. So let's just say for argument's sake, 1.2 million, you'd be charged an additional 6 million on top of the 7 players. So you have the total with the 7 players, and then they're saying you need to pay at least this much, whatever's like the absolute minimum contract you could sign a guy to, and we're charging you up until 12 players. So teams can't just like get rid of a bunch of players and be like, we're going to add this and this. It's like there's a minimum of what they're counting against your cap. So yeah, I mean, there's no realistic scenario in which the Lakers enter the season with 7 guys. I think the minimum would be 4. I mean, they like having 14. So I think they'll enter with at least 14, if not 15. And then final one here from Gary Singh. Thank you for the super chat. Back to my last message. You would call timeout right away if you got stopped on last possession, since Lakers are already up 1 point. Don't need to go score. That's a fair point. I like realized that as I was thinking through it. That's why I said, let's just assume Jenkins scores there. Although the counterpoint is you went with the defensive lineup to get the stop. So like, I guess if we're redoing the end there, ideally the Lakers get the stop and then they're up 1 point. And then now you call the timeout, you bring in your foul shooters, you get fouled, you hopefully win the game. So I understand that. I think based on the way they played it, it seemed like even with Jenkins scoring, they were okay with then not calling timeout and like running out that possession, going quickly, missing, fouling, then calling timeout, running the final possession. But look, you could argue it. I think the Lakers' crunch time record, clutch time records speaks for itself. So I don't want to nitpick or go against JJ too much, just because they've had a lot of success in these scenarios, including just the previous game against Orlando. But you could easily make that point of you could have put in Vando, you could have gone more defensive, you could have put in Hayes and like Hayes, Vando, and Jake, and just switch everything with LeBron and Luka, and then get the rebound. If you get the stop, call timeout. Or if they score, you just have to call the timeout to bring back your offensive guys. And then, you don't have the timeout late, but you figure it out on the fly. You can make that counterpoint, and I totally understand it. So not going to disagree with you there, but I am going to wrap here. Appreciate you all for tuning in after a loss. I think the Lakers are going to be okay. I think they're going to win the next 3 at least. And I think they're going to be the 3 seed and win somewhere between 53 to 54 games realistically. So things are still trending up. Lakers are playing great basketball, nearly won tonight. But all good things come to an end, and the streak ended tonight. But shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to the chat. For those watching right now, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that subscribe button. If you are not yet subscribed, trying to hit 35,000 subscribers by the end of the regular season. So we got about 3 weeks left, about 700 subscribers away. So it would be awesome if you hit that subscribe button. But if not, at least maybe drop a like, drop a comment. Would really appreciate it. And then for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with Lakers Collective at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then I actually will be recording an episode with Iztok Franco of Digging Basketball on Substack, all things Luka. It's been covering Luka for over a decade. We're going to be talking through, he just had an article go up on the Lakers at the 70-ish game mark, and we're going to talk through the offense, the defense, Luka, LA's ceiling, the loss last night. So be on the lookout for that. Haven't yet decided if I'm going live or if we're just going to record a remote episode, then post it. But if we do go live, it'll be at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time after Lakers Collective. But appreciate you all. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Hope you all get some rest. Keon Park says, who's watching without subscribing? Look, I mean, it's not I would say most of you are subscribed, but it's still like 30% of people watch without subscribing. Average student says, you the GOAT, Jovan. I appreciate that. That means the world. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to all of you guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening/day, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.